Numbers 32. Now the Reubenites and Gadites, who had very large herds and flocks, surveyed the lands of Jaser and Gilead, and they saw that the region was suitable for livestock. So the Gadites and Reubenites came to Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of the congregation, and said, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Elealeh, Sebam, Nebo, and Beon, which the Lord conquered before the congregation of Israel, are suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your sight, they said, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not make us cross the Jordan. But Moses asked the Gadites and Reubenites, shall your brothers go to war while you sit here? Why are you discouraging the Israelites from crossing into the land that the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to inspect the land. For when your fathers went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land that the Lord had given them. So the anger of the Lord was kindled that day, and he swore an oath, saying, because they did not follow me wholeheartedly, not one of the men 20 years of age or older who came out of Egypt will see the land that I swore to give Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not one except Caleb son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite and Joshua son of Nun, because they did follow the Lord wholeheartedly. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until the whole generation who had done evil in his sight was gone. Now behold, you, a brood of sinners, have risen up in place of your fathers to further stoke the burning anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once again leave this people in the wilderness, and you will be the cause of their destruction. Then the Gadites and Reubenites approached Moses and said, we want to build sheepfolds here for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we will arm ourselves and be ready to go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them into their place. Meanwhile, our little ones will remain in the fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every Israelite has taken possession of his inheritance. Yet we will not have an inheritance with them across the Jordan and beyond, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. Moses replied, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for battle, and if every one of your armed men crosses the Jordan before the Lord, until he has driven his enemies out before him, then when the land is subdued before the Lord, you may return and be free of obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land will belong to you as a possession before the Lord. But if you do not do this, you will certainly sin against the Lord, and be assured that your sin will find you out. Build cities for your little ones and folds for your flocks, but do what you have promised. The Gadites and Reubenites said to Moses, your servants will do just as our Lord commands. Our children, our wives, our livestock, and all our animals will remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your servants are equipped for war, and every man will cross over to the battle before the Lord, just as our Lord says. So Moses gave orders about them to Eleazar the priest, to Joshua son of Nun, and to the family leaders of the tribes of Israel. And Moses said to them, if the Gadites and Reubenites cross the Jordan with you, with every man armed for battle before the Lord, and the land is subdued before you, then you are to give them the land of Gilead as a possession. But if they do not arm themselves and go across with you, then they must accept their possession among you in the land of Canaan. The Gadites and Reubenites replied, as the Lord has spoken to your servants, so we will do. We will cross over into the land of Canaan armed before the Lord, that we may have our inheritance on this side of the Jordan. So Moses gave to the Gadites, to the Reubenites, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land including its cities and the territory surrounding them. And the Gadites built up Dibon, Ataroth, Aroer, Atroth, Shophan, Jazer, Jogbehah, Beth Nimrah, and Beth Haran as fortified cities, and they built folds for their flocks. The Reubenites built up Heshbon, Elealeh, Kiriathim, as well as Nebo and Baal-meon, whose names were changed, and Sibmah, and they renamed the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Gilead, captured it, and drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Gilead to the clan of Machir, son of Manasseh, and they settled there. Jair, a descendant of Manasseh, went and captured their villages and called them Havoth Jair. And Noba went and captured Kenneth and its villages and called it Noba, after his own name. Numbers 33. These are the journeys of the Israelites when they came out of the land of Egypt, by their divisions under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. At the Lord's command, Moses recorded the stages of their journey. These are the stages listed by their starting points. On the 15th day of the first month, on the day after the Passover, the Israelites set out from Ramesses. They marched out defiantly in full view of all the Egyptians, who were bearing all their firstborn, whom the Lord had struck down among them, for the Lord had executed judgment against their gods. The Israelites set out from Ramesses and camped at Succoth. They set out from Succoth and camped at Etham, on the edge of the wilderness. They set out from Etham and turned back to Pi-hahiroth, opposite Baal-zephon, and they camped near Migdol. They set out from Pi-hahiroth and crossed through the sea into the wilderness. And they journeyed 3 days into the wilderness of Etham and camped at Marah. They set out from Marah and came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. They set out from Elim and camped by the Red Sea. They set out from the Red Sea and camped in the desert of Sin. They set out from the desert of Sin and camped at Dophkah. They set out from Dophkah and camped at Alush. They set out from Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They set out from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from the wilderness of Sinai and camped at Kibroth-Hattaavah. They set out from Kibroth-Hattaavah and camped at Hazeroth. They set out from Hazeroth and camped at Rithmah. They set out from Rithmah and camped at Rimmon Perez. They set out from Rimmon Perez and camped at Libnah. They set out from Libnah and camped at Rissah. They set out from Rissah and camped at Kehelatha. They set out from Kehelatha and camped at Mount Shepher. They set out from Mount Shepher and camped at Haradah. They set out from Haradah and camped at Makaloth. They set out from Makaloth and camped at Tahath. They set out from Tahath and camped at Terah. They set out from Terah and camped at Mithkah. They set out from Mithkah and camped at Hashmonah. They set out from Hashmonah and camped at Moseroth. They set out from Moseroth and camped at Bene-Yaakon. They set out from Bene-Yaakon and camped at Hor-Haggidgad. They set out from Hor-Haggidgad and camped at Jotbatha. They set out from Jotbatha and camped at Abrona. They set out from Abrona and camped at Esion-Geber. They set out from Esion-Geber and camped at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. They set out from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor on the outskirts of the land of Edom. At the Lord's command, Aaron the priest climbed Mount Hor and died there on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year after the Israelites had come out of the land of Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. Now the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev in the land of Canaan, heard that the Israelites were coming, and the Israelites set out from Mount Hor and camped at Zalmonah. They set out from Zalmonah and camped at Punyon. They set out from Punyon and camped at Oboth. They set out from Oboth and camped at Abarim on the border of Moab. They set out from Eim and camped at Dibon-Gad. They set out from Dibon-Gad and camped at Almon-Diblathaim. They set out from Almon-Diblathaim and camped in the mountains of Abarim facing Nebo. They set out from the mountains of Abarim and camped on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. And there on the plains of Moab they camped by the Jordan, from Beth-Jeshimoth to Abel-Shittim. On the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and tell them, when you cross the Jordan into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you must assign to them cities to live in land of Canaan. You must drive out before you all the inhabitants of the land, destroy all their carved images and cast idols, and demolish all their high places. You are to take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to possess. And you are to divide the land by lot according to your clans. Give a larger inheritance to a larger clan, and a smaller inheritance to a smaller one. Whatever falls to each one by lot will be his. You will receive an inheritance according to the tribes of your fathers. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land before you, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They will harass you in the land where you settle. And then I will do to you what I had planned to do to them. That concludes today's reading. Thank you for being part of this holy journey. In these days when Christianity is tested and truth is dimmed by the noise of the world, your presence here matters more than ever. May these words strengthen your spirit, guide your steps, and remind you that you are never alone. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Go in his peace.